Hey folks, let's talk Nazis. Yeah, I hate them too. But there is a group of people out there talking a lot about them, and it's right up our alley. So we've got to unpack this stuff. So we're going to talk something that's been blowing up online, which is these comparisons between the US today and Germany in 1932. Take a quick look. You've probably seen it or something a lot like it.
They were an extremely open and progressive country for their time.
If there is one thing that keeps me up at night, genuinely, it is this.
So Germany was a super progressive nation, and National Socialism was the backlash. And as part of that, some creators are saying that the American far right today is a reaction to Obama's presidency as some kind of progressive high watermark. This is where we jump in, right? In terms of our understanding of resistance history. To do that right, we need to understand how power works, how authority gets abused and becomes abusive, and how we effectively stand up to it, and how people in the past effectively did that too, what kind of lessons we can draw. And for that, we need to kind of get it right. So those viral comparisons, they miss some critical points. The United States today isn't 1930s Germany on the brink of National Socialism. It's 2025 America on the brink of National Socialism. So let's explore the distinctions. First up, was Germany exceptionally progressive? No, not really. I mean, Berlin in the 1920s was, absolutely. Explosion of culture. I'm a huge classic movie buff, and this is your time if you care about classic movies. German cinema in the 1920s. Art, theater, a social scene so open it would make modern heads turn around. Bauhaus, Fritz Lang films, legendary cabarets. But Paris, Copenhagen, and other big cities, they had their own post-World War I cultural booms too. That's what drew Josephine Baker and F. Scott Fitzgerald to interwar Europe. It was like this collective gasp for fresh air after World War I's horrors. But, this is a big but, Berlin wasn't Germany. Huge place, look at a map. Step outside any of the big cities and what you find is a lot of conservative, traditional folks who looked at Berlin's decadence with deep suspicion, if not outright anger. Yeah, there's some progressive laws and there's some new ideas floating around. Democracy was a new thing to many European countries. But to call the whole nation exceptionally progressive is smoothing over some very rough and powerful countercurrents of old school thinking and deep, simmering resentments. And those resentments turned out to be a much bigger deal. And that brings us to the Obama as the progressive spark for today's far right idea. It's another one of those just two simple arguments that I'm seeing as part of those viral posts. The idea that Obama's presidency was a big progressive moment, and now we're just seeing the pendulum swing back hard with the far right, as if it's just like National Socialism reacting to Weimar. That's not how history, or frankly, American politics works. Sure, Obama's election was a massive historical moment. Gotcha. His administration got some important progressive-ish things done. Affordable Care Act, ending Don't Ask, Don't Tell, eventually backing marriage equality. Those are big wins for many. But for actual progressives who remember them, the Obama years weren't some pure, unbroken progressive dream. On plenty of issues, foreign policy, national security, certain economic policies. There was a lot of continuity with what came before. And both liberals and progressives at the time had plenty to criticize. This isn't to downplay the good things, but we can't just slap a simple progressive era label on it, just like we can't with Weimar Germany. This is more suggestive of the lack of a real political left in the United States today, to see the Obama years as anything like a progressive highlight. Progressive. Look it up. More importantly, blaming today's far right only on a reaction to Obama, it completely ignores the decades of groundwork that was laid for it, right? The racial anxieties, the anti-immigrant feelings, the Christian nationalist undercurrents. These things didn't just pop up in 2009. They've got long, deep roots in American history. The Southern strategy, the culture wars of the 80s and 90s, the rise of right-wing media empires on talk radio, Fox News, and now everywhere online. These forces were building long before Obama. Now, did Obama's presidency become a lightning rod for some of those sentiments? Absolutely. The whole birtherism insanity is proof of that. But today's far-right movement is a nasty cocktail of those old grievances mixed with new ones. actively fictionalized into existence by a powerful network of politicians and ideologues, and a media that can no longer respond with clarity to that. It's not a simple backlash. Just like National Socialism fed on the raw wounds of World War I, economic collapse, and centuries of anti-Semitism. Not just a dislike of Berlin's cabaret scene. The ultra-nationalist movement in the United States today is fueled by a much wider, much deeper, and much older set of issues than just reacting to Obama. If we don't get that, we can't fight it. So, how did National Socialism really take hold? It wasn't pretty, and it wasn't simple. And it wasn't just a cultural grumble. The National Socialists rose from a toxic swamp of World War I and the Versailles Treaty, the war guilt, the insane reparations, losing land, the big stab in the back lie. It left many Germans feeling humiliated and ready to be furious at something or someone to blame for it. A failing Weimar Republic. Imagine your money becoming worthless. Hyperinflation. And then you lose your job in a massive depression while your government is paralyzed and under attack from extremists on both sides. That's Weimar for many. The terror of communism. The Russian Revolution was just a few years earlier in 1917. It scared the hell out of a lot of Germans. Well, it scared the hell out of a lot of people, a lot of places. The National Socialists played on that fear. They painted themselves as the only ones tough enough to stop a communist takeover. And the communists were a big, powerful, organized force. Imagine a place in which there is an actual far right and then an actual far left to counter it, and those two are fighting it out. Meanwhile, the folks in the middle are scared to death. And then there's rapid ultranationalism and racism. These weren't side issues. They were the rotten core of National Socialism from day one. And here's a key difference in how they built power. Initially, National Socialism was largely a bottom-up street movement out of Munich. The brown shirts weren't a small fringe group. They became a massive paramilitary army, hundreds of thousands strong, maybe over 1 million by 1933 when Hitler grabbed the chancellorship. That's a year after the Nazis had already made huge gains in the elections. Who joined? Disillusioned ex-soldiers, the unemployed, people feeling betrayed and left behind, usually a combination of all those things. They took over the streets with violence, intimidation, and relentless organizing. They were a physical force pushing up from below. Today, we see some paramilitary outfits in the United States ultranationalist scene. The laughable Oath Keepers, the hilarious Three Percenters, various white supremacist and Christian nationalist groups, the party that we saw on January 6th. They're dangerous, no doubt. Groups of stupid people are, and they get a lot of headlines. But their size, their organization, their ability to control public space day to day, it's not even in the same league as the brown shirts in Germany. They just wish they were. What we have now in the United States is much different. It's an ultranationalist coalition that's more concentrated at the top, with power figures and media empires pushing this populist propaganda down to fire up the people at the bottom. They're continuing to build a base and then trying to keep that base activated, but doing that through grievance. It's not primarily a massive independent street army forcing its way up. That's why the current regime needs to control the existing US military. It didn't create and then bring along its own army. The National Socialists did. America's story is different, and so is its leadership crisis. The problem we face in the United States in 2025, the ultranationalism, the racist rhetoric, are terrifyingly real. But our history, our society, our economy, they're not Germany's of the 1920s and 30s. The legacy of slavery and systemic racism is a uniquely American wound that shapes everything here in ways that don't just map onto 1930s Germany, except where the National Socialists directly borrowed from the US's racist example, so it's got that going for it. And the leadership? Worlds apart. Hitler, in his early to mid-40s, when the Nazis were rising, was a disturbingly effective, high-energy, charismatic, even people who hated him admitted this, speaker. He hammered home a consistent message of strength and iron will, no matter how insane his ideas were. Like grabbing the Sudetenland. It doesn't sound so crazy today, but at the time it seemed like madness. But he did it with this chilling focus, making France and Britain almost literally kneel. The Nazis projected at all times absolute strength. It was their thing. Would you apply that same language to this lot? Weakness, flip-flopping, public rambling from Trump, RFK Jr., Elon Musk, you take your pick. Unthinkable for the National Socialists. Their whole brand was being the strong alternative to what they called a weak, decadent system. They had to project it, not just name call it. So today's U.S. ultranationalist movement, it rallies around different kinds of figures. Someone like Trump, much older, right? Known for wild policy swings, tariffs, anyone, rambling speeches. He can't even describe the Declaration of Independence to save his life, and it's in the name. Power is hitting differently for them. It's less about ironclad ideology. That's Stephen Miller's territory and the folks at the Heritage Foundation. Or dynamic energy. Literally no one in this group, by the way, unless you count like a superhuman ick factor, or the likelihood of being shoved into a locker in middle school. But Trump himself is more about stoking grievance and that cult of personality, and has got to perpetuate it. I mean, he promises to end a war with a phone call, and then it totally doesn't happen. That way of power and loyalty isn't a replay of 1930s Germany. What's happening here with our deep racial fault lines, our unique brand of political fecklessness, and the nationalist supremacist coalition now running the federal government is its own beast. And it's pervasive enough. But we have to understand it on its terms to have any chance of resisting it. If you're looking for parallels, be careful. History doesn't repeat. It might rhyme. Maybe look at France during the same period. If we have to find some historical echo for how our society's mainstream, especially its blandly inert white middle class and elites, or its spineless leadership, that can just let extremists walk in, maybe, just maybe, interwar France has some lessons. The endless political squabbling of the Third Republic, the paralysis as the Nazi threat grew, the way some French leaders and parts of society just underestimated or just didn't look at the danger, didn't want to see it. That might be a more relevant, if still imperfect, mirror for how to fumble, totally lose the ball during a crisis. It's what contributes to France's surprising surrender to the Nazis. It terrified everybody. And then its pervasive collaboration, and of course, Vichy. The bottom line, getting these historical details right matters. It's not just an academic game. To fight authoritarianism effectively, we need a clear-eyed diagnosis of the specific threats that we face right here, right now, not just lazy comparisons to the past. Google competently, folks. The playbook might have similar pages, but the game, the players, the whole damn field are different. Learn from history, yes, but don't get trapped by bad analogies. So here's your PS. You want to go deeper into Weimar Germany and how it felt to live through it? I got 4 things for you. Watch Babylon Berlin. Seriously. It's a German series. I found it on MHC Choice. It throws you right into the wild, vibrant, and deeply troubled world of late 20s Berlin. The culture, the politics, the crime. And it's based on novels by Volker Kutscher that are praised for nailing the era's atmosphere. It makes all those complexities I talked about feel real. It's really a great example of how historical fiction can get at historical truths and lived experience. Also, watch Hitler's Reich, a German journal from Deutsche Welle. For a straight-up historical dive, it's a new docu-series from DW. It's on right now. It's on YouTube. It's on their app. They use personal diaries from a number of different people, from Jewish school teachers to Hitler Youth kids, to show how ordinary folks saw the rise of National Socialism and how it hit them personally. It's a powerful way to see the big picture through individual lives, finding the macro and the micro. And last I checked, it was just up to part 2, just before the invasion of Poland. And I just looked at it a couple of minutes ago. It's an amazing resource, and I'm looking forward to the rest. And a couple of podcasts. I never recommend podcasts. Personally, I kind of hate most podcasts. I think they're terrible history podcasts, and I get to hear a lot of them as the film and digital media editor of the Pulpit Historian. But I recommend 2 for this. One, Nazis, The Road to Power. This is a BBC Radio 4 podcast. If you're into podcasts, this one it's just top notch. It's a scripted historical narrative that transports you to Munich in the 1920s and 30s as the Nazi movement was taking shape. For that kind of deep dive storytelling in audio, it's as good as it gets. And also, I recommend The Divided Dial from WNYC's On the Media Studios. That podcast, created by a brilliant public historian, Katie Thornton, it's crucial for understanding a big piece of the American puzzle. She digs into how the far right started to exploit disaffection in our society through their takeover of talk radio, especially as exploded in the 80s and 90s. Rush Limbaugh gets going. That connects directly to what I was saying about the long groundwork laid for today's movements. Stay informed, folks, and keep thinking critically. We're just getting started.